So, how is this wrenching transformation being put into place? Well, there are 4 very specific routes being used. In the rural areas, it's called the Wildlands Project. In the cities, it's called smart growth. In business, it's called public-private partnerships. And in government, it's called stakeholder councils and non-elected boards and regional government, or reinvented government. Let's take them one at a time. First, the Wildlands Project was the brainchild of Earth First's Dave Foreman. And it literally calls for what he called, the word he used, the rewilding of 50% of all the lands in every state back to the way it was before Christopher Columbus set foot on this land. In 1983, when Foreman first dreamed up the scheme for the Wildlands Project, he said, quote, "It is not enough to preserve the roadless, undeveloped country remaining. We must recreate wilderness in large regions, move out the cars and civilized people, dismantle the roads and dams, reclaim the plowed lands and clear cuts, and reintroduce extirpated species." Destruction of human civilization was his goal. In reality, the Wildlands Project is a diabolical plan to herd people off the rural lands and into human settlements. Crazy, you say? Yes. Impossible? Not so fast. From the demented mind of Dave Foreman, the plan became the blueprint of the UN's Biodiversity Treaty. So now the scheme is international in scope with the power of law. Thomas Lovejoy, a science advisor to the Federal Department of Interior, said, quote, "We will map the whole nation, determine development for the whole country, and regulate it." And your local elected officials are helping to implement this insanity. Yet, they are quick to deny that such ideas have their origins on the international level, and they accuse me of wearing tinfoil hats and hearing voices. Well, here's a voice I hear. Again, Maurice Strong said at the UN's Earth Summit, quote, "Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized nations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?" And that is the true agenda we face. But how do you remove people from the land? Well, one step at a time. There are many tools in place to stop human activity and grow the wilderness. Deny grazing rights and water rights on public lands. It becomes more difficult and more expensive to run the farm or the ranch, and eventually it goes out of business. Lock away natural resources by creating more national parks. It shuts down the mines, and they go out of business. Call every mosquito-infested swamp and occasional mud puddle a wetlands, and ban any development around it. Invent a spotted owl shortage and pretend it can't live in a forest where timber is cut. Shut off the forest. Then when no trees are cut, there's nothing to feed the mill. The mills then go out of business. And so do whole towns, as there are no jobs. The governor of Maryland is enforcing an agenda without a vote by the legislature. He's doing it through executive action, called Plan Maryland, that will lock away over 400,000 acres of land banned from any development for at least 20 years. One of the key provisions is a policy to ban septic tanks as a means to protect the Chesapeake Bay, even though there is no evidence that septic tanks do any damage whatsoever. The only result of this ban will be to make it impossible to live in rural areas, unless you want to spend several $1 million on a private water treatment plant. Getting people off the rural lands and into the cities is the real purpose, not environmental protection. The Wildlands Project comes in many names and many programs. Wilderness areas, comprehensive land use plans, bikeways, greenways, heritage areas, land management, rails to trails, open space, wolf and bear reintroduction, conservation easements, and many more. Each of these programs is designed to make it just a little harder to live on the land, a little more expensive, a little more hopeless. In reality, the process is simply herding people off of rural lands and into human habitat areas or our cities. And that leads us to the second path to sustainable development, called smart growth. They put a line around the city and tell you no growth can take place out of that line. Urban sprawl, they say disdainfully. They refuse to build more roads as a ploy to get you out of your car and into public transportation, restricting mobility. New highways, they say, are feeders to more development. They even stop widening the existing roads for the same reasons. So roads become overcrowded and gridlock, and they blame development. Their new ploy is to force cars to share the road with bicycles. The complete street, they call it. In many smart growth cities, new apartment buildings now have no garages or parking lots. We don't want any stinking cars here. Smart growth creates an unnatural restriction on space inside the controlled city limits, so there is a shortage of houses, and prices go up. That means populations will have to be controlled because now there is a shortage of land. That's why kind, compassionate environmentalist Dr. Jacques Cousteau declared, quote, "In order to stabilize world populations, we must eliminate 350,000 people per day." Sustainabilists call for an 85% reduction in human population. Now, I've made arrangements with Louis here. When you leave here, outside there are big containers of Kool-Aid. All of you need to do your patriotic duty and take a drink. And I guarantee you there will be no environmentalist in your way taking up the Kool-Aid. It's all for you. 85% reduction in population. How do we do that? Well, do we use the proven success of China's population control methods of forced abortions and sterilizations? The Chinese, I can tell you, are huge supporters of sustainable development, and I'm sure that they are anxious to share some ideas with us. Of course, the comprehensive development plans are the tool of choice in nearly every city in the nation to produce the proper smart growth community. Through these plans, energy and water use is tightly controlled. Smart growth advocates force individuals to live in denser communities that take up smaller tracts of land per housing unit. What they actually prefer is that you all live in high-rise buildings with stores on the bottom, offices in the middle, people living on the top. You never touch the ground. The third way to sustainable development, inside the human habitat areas, our cities and our towns, government is steadily being controlled by an elite ruling class called stakeholder councils. These are mostly NGOs who, like thieves in the night, just show up to stake their claim to enforce their own private agendas. The function of legitimate elected government within the sustainabilist system is fast becoming little more than the rubber stamp to create and enforce the dictates of the councils. It's the demise of representative government. And the councils appear and grow almost overnight. You'll find watershed councils that regulate human action near every trickling stream, river, or lake. Meters are put on wells. Special action councils control home size, tree pruning or removal, even the color you can paint your home or the height of your grass. Historic preservation councils control development in downtown areas, disallowing expansion in new buildings. Sometimes they even disallow repairs on existing buildings unless specific, expensive, perhaps even non-existent materials are used. They mandate it. In rural areas, we find the establishment of fire safety councils that prevent those living in rural areas from removing vegetation and dead trees from wooded areas on their own land, because to do so wouldn't be natural and damages the ecology. So as a result, the fires burn much, much hotter, and it damages much more land and many more trees than it ever would be, but, well, the ecologists know best. So as a result, forests can't be cut. Farmers pay taxes to draw from their own wells. Commercial fishermen can't fish, and regulations cover all possible human activity. Once the councils are established, it becomes nearly impossible to discuss issues with your local elected representatives. Instead, they will automatically refer you to the proper council or administration or department run by, in many cases, unresponsive appointed hacks armed with their own political agenda. They don't care what you have to say. These non-elected councils fit almost perfectly the definition of a state Soviet, a system of councils that report to an apex council and then implement a predetermined outcome. Soviets are the operating mechanism of a government-controlled economy, the exact opposite of a constitutional republic. And the fourth path to sustainable development, as I mentioned, public-private partnerships. You hear the propaganda of the public-private partnerships nightly on your television as their commercials keep telling you to go green. And they use Congress to build more wealth and power. GE and Sylvania used their partnership with government to ban their own product, the incandescent light bulb, and replace it with the new green bulbs. By next year, you won't be allowed to buy 100-watt incandescent bulbs. Why? Because GE and Sylvania make 3 times as much from the new ones because they're more expensive. Such is the reality of green industry. The truth is, there would be very little legitimate green industry if not for the billions of dollars in grant money shelled out to the partnerships to develop alternative energy schemes. In fact, wind energy may well be the least sustainable and least eco-friendly of all electricity options. It possibly requires more energy to manufacture, haul, and install these monstrous windmills and their transmission systems than that windmill will generate in its lifetime. And yet, the nation, in the name of sustainable development, is investing everything in our future to enforce windmills and other alternative energy over real energy providers. Alternative energy amounts to less than 1% of our energy needs, even though they've been working on it for over 40 years with billions of our tax dollars. And for every green job created, 2 in legitimate industry are lost because of green rules and regulations.